Let's explore the detour of now in the quest for mindfulness. This evening's lesson is drawn from a good-hearted question found on Reddit. Is it okay to be aware of the past? The individual wrote, I sometimes figure out things that happened in the past. For example, when I meditate and there is a sound around me, I am sometimes aware of a sound that reverberated a few seconds ago. What mistakes I made during previous meditations are noticed that a thought arose a few seconds ago due to me changing meditation object, which are for me helpful aids to better meditation practice. I wanted to ask because the meditation community always insists that we be in the now. I've never seen anyone pointing this aspect before, so I'd like to apologize. This question was a trifle opaque. I've wrestled with it to try to make it a little bit more lucid, but I didn't do a very good job of that. So, but the gist came through, and I'd like to do my best to answer it. Let us begin with broad brushstrokes. Sturgeon's Law reminds us that 90% of everything sucks, but not in the fun, tingly way. This applies to meditation teachers. Yes, there may be an extreme minority who are actually malicious, but the majority aren't. The majority of not-so-good meditation teachers are just lazy-minded or ill-informed. This is illustrated when we take in the yin and yang of it all. Legend tells us the Buddha had a wicked cousin named Devadatta, and that Devadatta thought it was splendid to be rigid, fearful, superstitious, controlling, elitist, cryptic, competitive, and even cruel. Whereas Gautama, who is nicknamed the Buddha, thought the opposite. To be flexible, loving, rational, laid back, egalitarian, lucid, cooperative, and kind. This was the way. Those who are rigid favor active analysis and active concentration. Those who are flexible favor passive awareness and passive release. The Buddha lived, or is said to have lived, during what some anthropologists or archaeologists describe as the Iron Age. You and I live in the Silicon Age, where we enjoy so many wonderful technologies that we take them for granted, such as the functional magnetic resonance imaging machine known as the fMRI. Based on findings that have come to light in the last 20 or 40 years, let us view the intricacies of mindfulness and meditation through the lens of neuroscience. We're going to start with bad news and then move our way over to good news. Let us begin with bad news. When we over-rely on certain neurological structures, such as the medial prefrontal cortex or the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, and we rely upon them to actively analyze or actively concentrate, in the short term, our blood can collect at our amygdala This lumpy thing that seems to be the seat of both aggression and anxiety, which is found in the metaphoric dungeon of the limbic system. In the long term, over-reliance upon this prefrontal cortex can cause us to present with symptoms of depression. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm a big wimpy thing. I don't like despair or rage or terror. And I'm certainly not going to devote myself to sitting cross-legged on the floor for hours to cultivate more of them. That's just me. Maybe I'm silly that way. Oh, sure. Call me provincial. Now, good news. That is not our only choice. Let us begin with mindfulness. Every time we inhale, whether we know it or not, we are accessing our sympathetic nervous system, ensconced within the thoracic or ribcage region of our spinal cord. This bad boy has evolved to support noticing. In what manner? In a manner that is vulnerable, passive, visceral, and random. Therefore, we are wired to notice all manner of things. We are wired to perceive sights, sounds, sensations, flavors, scents, and the like. We are wired to notice emotions, intentions, thoughts, memories, and imaginings. The first of 7 enlightenment factors is mindfulness. The second is investigation, which seems to infer a enthusiastic vulnerability, which is the opposite of defensiveness. Because of this vulnerability, we soon viscerally experience that our thoughts are not digital, but analog, exposing us to many, many spectrums. The spectrum describing the external or everything from the external to the internal, everything from the physical to the mental, everything from the pleasurable to the painful, everything from the interesting to the boring, everything from the glorious to the grotesque. Now, this can seem overwhelming. What are we to do with that which we notice? That brings us to meditation. Every time we exhale, whether we know it or not, we access our parasympathetic nervous system, ensconced within both the lower lumbar region of our spinal cord, as well as the tippy top of the cervical region that some people describe as the reticular activating system, or simply the brainstem. Regardless of what you call it, every time we exhale, we are wired for both physical relaxation as well as mental release. So, I promised you some good news, and here it is. When we set aside the active analysis and active concentration that relies upon our prefrontal cortex, and instead practice the mindfulness and meditation that depends upon our sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems, then that blood that remember we talked about coalescing at our amygdala, it shifts to this structure that kind of looks like a baseball mitt. The fancy name is the anterior cingulate gyrus. And it functions as the hub of our mirror neurons, the seat of empathy and compassion and love. Practice mindfulness and meditation in harmony with your sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system, and you will discover firsthand what the greatest Dzogchen Lamas of Tibet learned, which is that the highest love is spontaneous and uncontrived. So now that we understand that there's a difference between concentration and mindfulness, and there's also a difference between analysis and meditation, how does the present moment factor into this? Consider, if you will, this piece of art. This gal, the color of a cumulus cloud, appears to be actively sporting in tantric union. This reminds us that contrivance will always be trumped by spontaneity. Consider her partner, the color of the azure sky, who appears to be passively savoring the same tantric union. This infers that there is more than one flavor of spontaneity, and that the scattered spontaneity we sometimes experience after our third espresso will always be trumped by the centered spontaneity that is the byproduct of mindfulness and meditation. But wait, there's more. The more that our choices, utterances, and deeds flow in the effortless effort of love's centered spontaneity, the more our meditation, no less the entirety of our life, could feel as blissful as the real or imagined paradise or pure land or vati of a real or imagined Buddha. I do look forward to now putting this into practice with you together as a team after approximately 30 seconds of housekeeping. This is Lama Jigme Gyatso of the Buddha Joy Meditation School. For more than 30 years, I spent about 8 hours a day, almost every day, studying, practicing, mastering, and reverse engineering the teachings and techniques of each sect of Buddhism so that you would not have to. Welcome, my friends, to Meditate Like a Jedi, which is made possible due to the generosity of viewers just like you. Now I need to quickly switch texts. Please bear with me. Fabulous. This evening, let us practice the latest iteration of love and letting go. And just like a personal trainer might have us do circuit training, we're going to play with a circuit. We're going to perform a gentle contemplation of loving kindness, a gentle contemplation of impermanence, and then we're going to rest in mindfulness and meditation, and then do it again. To come together as a team, let us bring the 4 bases of mindfulness, the circumstantial, the physical, the interpersonal, and the mental. Let us bring the 4 bases of mindfulness into the path of stress and loving kindness. Please chant with me. Since we are not alone in our mental frustrations, we could also long that others' mental needs also be met. So let us lovingly wish that all beings everywhere experience great wisdom, the wisdom of a Buddha. As we breathe in, we can silently and mentally recite the word wise. As we breathe out, we can silently and mentally recite the word all. It's kind of like we've invited a friend over for lunch and we're ladling out the lentils into their bowl. Now, it's not her job to believe this or visualize this. If all we do is silently, mentally, and passively recite these words in harmony with our breathing, we will wind up exercising the neural pathways responsible for loving kindness. I think it could be fun if we play with this exercise for 4 rounds, assuming that a round is simply 1 inhalation followed by 1 exhalation. Let us count the 4 rounds upon our left little finger, sliding the tip or advancing the tip of our left thumb during each inhalation. Please chant with me. Since we are not alone in our interpersonal frustrations, we could also long that others' interpersonal needs also be met. Let us count our next set, of 4 rounds, upon our left ring finger. Please chant with me. Since we are not alone in our physical frustrations, we could also long that others' physical needs also be met. Let us count an additional 4 rounds upon our left middle finger. Please chant with me. Since we are not alone in our circumstantial frustrations, we could also long that other circumstantial needs also be met. We're using the word boon as a one syllable synonym of good fortune. Let us count an additional 4 rounds upon our left index finger. Over the last few minutes, we explored how we can count 16 rounds on the 4 fingers and 1 thumb of our left hand. Did you know that we can count sets of those rounds upon our right hand? We just counted our first set of 16 rounds, and now we can start our second set of 16 rounds. So, sets on our right hand, actual rounds on our left hand. And it works out best if you rest your palms upon your... It's most ergonomically sound if you rest your hands upon your lap. Please chant with me. Observing the coming and going of appearing circumstantial phenomena helps us to see that ever-changing one and all there is nothing permanent to grasp. We can use the word lots as a synonym for circumstance, and we can use the word melt as a metaphor of change. Together, observing the coming and going of sensual physical phenomena helps us to feel that ever-changing one and all there is nothing permanent to grasp. We can use the word forms as a synonym for bodies. Please chant with me. Observing the coming and going of resounding interpersonal phenomena helps us to hear that ever-changing one and all there is nothing permanent to grasp. We can use the word feels as a synonym for our experience of the interpersonal. Observing the coming and going of lucid mental phenomena helps us to clearly perceive that ever-changing one and all there is nothing permanent to grasp. So what do we mean by lucid? Simply that our minds have the ability to perceive, emote, intend, reason, recall, and imagine. For the next 14 sets, let us bring whatever we spontaneously notice into the path of awareness and letting go. Remember, every time we inhale, we are already wired to generate a vertical traction between our tush and our head. Similarly, every time we exhale, we're wired to release it. There is no need to torture ourselves into contriving the full lotus position. The examples of the most ancient Buddhist statuary reveal the quarter lotus position, where one calf is simply resting upon the other calf. There's no need to force this. Remember, the knees are only hinge joints. They don't respond well to force. And even though the hips are ball joints, if we simply arrange our legs and let gravity do the work, within a week or two, we will have rediscovered what we learned to do as toddlers. Sit cross-legged. And now we start our second lap. Since we are not alone in our mental frustrations, we could also long that others' mental needs also be met. Welcome to this evening's live stream. The moment you have a specific question about Buddhist chanting, Buddhist meditation, Buddhist philosophy, or how to apply them, simply type your question in great detail in the chat window. Please chant with me. Since we are not alone in our interpersonal frustrations, we could also long that others' interpersonal needs also be met. As we breathe in, we can silently and mentally recite love. As we breathe out, we can silently, mentally, and passively recite the word all. And so we are just using this silent and mental recitation to exercise our loving intention. Since we are not alone in our physical frustrations, we could also long that others' physical needs also be met. Since we are not alone in our circumstantial frustrations, we could also long that others' circumstantial needs also be met. We're using the word boon as a synonym for good fortune. Observing the coming and going of appearing circumstantial phenomena helps us to see that ever-changing one and all there is nothing permanent to grasp. So lots is a one-syllable synonym for our circumstance, and melt is a metaphor of impermanence. Observing the coming and going of sensual physical phenomena helps us to feel that ever-changing one and all there is nothing permanent to grasp. We're using forms as a synonym of our bodies. Observing the coming and going of resounding interpersonal phenomena helps us to hear that ever-changing one and all there is nothing permanent to grasp. We're using feels as a synonym for our experience of the interpersonal. Observing the coming and going of lucid mental phenomena helps us to clearly perceive that ever-changing one and all there is nothing permanent to grasp. In Theravada culture, a conical structure such as this has come to symbolize a Buddha's enlightened mind. During our next 14 sets of 16 breaths, let us bring whatever we spontaneously notice into the path of awareness and letting go. As we breathe in, we could silently and mentally recite the demonstrative pronoun this, while we watch the antics of mind as it perceives, emotes, intends, reasons, recalls, and imagines. With each exhalation, we can silently and mentally recite the one-syllable verb ease as we relax into mind's non-graspable nature. Let us now rest our minds in perception and release. Live long and prosper. Let us seal this evening's practice by progressively chanting loving wishes for universal enlightenment and well-being. May all minds clear yet and permanent be as enlightened as a Buddha's mind. May all relationships resounding yet impermanent be as loving as a Buddha's speech. May all bodies sensual yet impermanent be as beautifully healthy as a real or imagined Deva's form. May all circumstances appearing yet impermanent be as safe and abundant as a real or imagined Devi's land. If you feel that I have earned it, you could give this live stream a thumbs up. You could even help support this channel. In approximately 10 2/3 hours, I would very much like to return to lead tomorrow's early meditation class and group practice. And if you are as geeky as me, may the Force be with you always.